Sid Lewis in low weight pregnancy.
Hey, no way.
We don't need no parent, and you wanna know why?
Listen to these reasons so you can stay fly.
Contraception is the way you all wanna go.
Cause you don't want no baby skirt.
No. Birth control prevents you from having a baby.
Cause when your mom find out, you gonna be yelling. So we don't need no parent to get this stuff.
Cause if you do, your life will be real tough.
Welcome to another edition of Annulment Proof, the only place on YouTube where marriage gets objectively defined. So we're going to talk about the history of NFP, which is shrouded in mystery, and there's contradictions all over. But by the end of the video, we're going to find out why the church has never approved NFP and can never approve NFP. So I got going because someone sent me a video of Christian Wagner, a.k.a. Walmart Thomist, Scholastic Answers, was saying that the history of NFP and the thing it all got started back in 1880 with the Sacred Penitentiary approving it and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, no. So I wanted to go through it. Also, by the way, I mentioned Matt Gaspers in the preview, whatever, the clip art. Matt Gaspers will also tell you that it's the Sacred Penitentiary, the rulings back in 1880. That's where NFP got started. And then my boy Enoch is going to explain what, Taylor Marshall and everyone else will say, Father Ripperger, we got to go back to Pius XII in the 50s because that's where we got the grave reasons. And that's where NFP came from. It's almost like Protestantism, the Bible just fell out of the sky. NFP just fell out of the sky. That's basically where we're at. I got a few things to show you, but the first thing I want to show you is, let's go to USCCB website. Hang on, check this out. All right, so you will go to NFP on the USCCB website, and here is a brief history of NFP. So let's click on it and see what that we can find out about the brief history, shall we? Boom. Couldn't find this page. Ain't there. It's been there for years. You cannot find the history. I emailed the guy. We'll see if Fleming or whatever his name was. We'll see if we can get him to give me some info. But at any rate, let's go to Christian Wagner, and see. We'll listen to what he says real quick, and then we'll hopefully wrap this up. Share this tab. Check me. All right. Hit it, Christian. By the way, this is Christian Wagner right here. He is, like I said, the Walmart Thomist. I liked his name, but he didn't want to talk to me very much. Anyway, let's go back. Here. Boom. Okay. So hang on a sec. So he's reading from the Diamond Brothers, and he was kind of surprised what he found out about that they reject NFP.
Water 3 times, or on the cross. Okay. Wait, reject NFP? Wait, they're against NFP? I didn't know this. I didn't know this. The NFP has been supported by the Holy Office since at least the 1880s.
NFP has been supported by the Holy Office since at least the 1880s. That's what he just said, obviously. And no, I want to get this back to where that's what I like better. Wrong. That is like an urban legend, and I'm going to explain why in a second. Let's just go there right now while we're at it, and then we'll go back to see what he says. Let me repeat what he just said. Let's go back and listen.
So any mortal sins confessed to such quote priest must be any mortal sins quote confessed to such quote priest must be confessed.
His videos are super long.
Before receiving communion at the traditional mass. Those leaving the quote new mass,
dude, come on,
adherence to the quote Vatican II false quote church should also make the same profession of faith.
All right, I guess it was my fault for backing up so far.
If there's any validity, if you can have no, he says your own children. Since there are barely any true Catholic priests in the whole country, you can have a Catholic.
I made a mistake.
Baptism, you could administer baptism to your own children.
I didn't know it was going to take this long. Sorry.
Pour the water 3 times. Pour on the cross.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Here we go. Maybe we'll let it go a little bit.
Wait, they're against NFP? I didn't know this. I didn't know this. The NFP has been supported by the Holy Office since at least the 1880s. See, they just make stuff up. They just literally just make stuff up. Yeah, the rejection NFP back to the 80s, condemnation of Fenianism was in the 50s.
All right, so Wagner here, I think, presumably arrogantly, is just saying they make stuff up. We got to go back, and maybe I shouldn't say he's arrogant. He just doesn't know or doesn't want to know. He just kind of blocks people and stuff. So let's go back to 1880 and see what we can find out. All right, then we'll get to Enoch here in a minute. We'll just cruise to my blog page for a little bit. Here, we'll go on this, and I'll just make it full screen. We'll blow through this to show why the Sacred Penitentiary, which is effectively the ruling dicastery back in those days for these types of questions, said no NFP. All right, so it started. So the history of NFP has always it's in the Old Testament. You weren't allowed because wives were unclean. Because I'm confusing things. Let's not worry about that right now. But at any rate, you had to avoid during menses, during the flowers, they called it, because there was no fertility there. Okay. Now, the important part, back in 388, St. Augustine was he was beaten up on the Manichees because I think he used to be one or something, but he goes, is it not you, Manichees, that used to warn us to watch as much as we could the time after the purification of the menses, when a woman is likely to conceive, and at that time refrain from intercourse? Okay, so he's saying don't do that, because there's some early NFP for you right there. All right. So then it goes on to say, the eminent doctor of grace, da 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 da. Okay, so you're basically making the wife into a mistress, all right, when you use her in such a way so that you make sure there's no babies. Dig it? So where did NFP start? It's in the Bible, and then it started, or I should say, avoiding fertility is in the Bible, of prohibited. Then St. Augustine told these Manichees, knock it off, way back in 388. Okay, so fast forward to 1853, way back. So usually it's bishops that write these dicasteries and say, hey, what about this? So, okay, this is what Christian Wagner is talking about. This is the famous question given to the Sacred Penitentiary, and this is what Matt Gaspers will always come back at you. He'll say, look, NFP has been alive since 1853, dog, so you got nothing to talk about. You're nuts. Well, let's look. So, in 1853, a bishop of France, asks the penitentiary, question: if you've got a married couple relying on the opinion of learned physicians, so people are starting to catch on to this fertility stuff that much harder, are convinced that there are several days each month when conception cannot occur, are those who use their marriage right except on such days? So they're avoiding. They're not using their marriage right during the infertile period. That's been the talk of the town, especially if they have legitimate reasons for abstaining from the conjugal act. So they're saying, can we? Is it okay to use the marriage right, just not during the fertile time, if we have good reason to not use the marriage right during the fertile time? And the answer is, don't worry about it. They're not to be disturbed, provided they do nothing to impede conception. So people take that and run with it. What this says is you can't impede conception. So these guys are abstaining from the conjugal act. Who knows what their reasons are? It could be a business trip. It could be somebody sick, whatever. But as long as they're not trying to impede conception. So this doesn't approve NFP. It just says you don't have to crank out as many babies as possible. It's okay to not have 12 kids, or you have to have a certain number of kids. You don't have to, because it's just nature. It's not a duty. Let me read through this really quick, because I already answered it. I'm going to repeat myself. Obviously, this response is not meant to condemn artificial contraception. yet endorse NFP because artificial contraception is not needed when conception cannot occur. So yeah, they're like, why would you say, if you want to use this, if this is just a condemnation of contraception, why would you use contraception when conception cannot occur? You obviously wouldn't. Are we allowed to use? Are you going to condemn us using contraception when we're going to avoid the fertile period? No, it's obvious that that's not what it's about. That's stupid. People doing NFP don't use contraception during the NFP part. I suppose somebody might barely, but just to be extra mega safe or something like that. But all of it has a failure rate, as you know. So, okay. The response simply indicates that it is not against nature to use marriage when conception cannot occur. So yes, there's no official day or part of the month you can or can't, and there's no number of babies you're supposed to have. You don't have to have any babies. You just have to not mess with the nature of the act. Cool? But this is, and mess with what the purpose of the act. But this is against nature to take measures to avoid, thwart, exclude, impede conception. This is articulated in Casti Connubii 59. All right, this is important. Nor are those considered as acting against nature who in the married state use their right in the proper manner, although on account of natural reasons, new life cannot be brought forth. Okay. So I'm going to get to that more in a minute, what the Roman Rota says about that. In other words, as long as you're not doing anything, it's if there's forces independent of you which create the fact that new life cannot be brought forth, and NFP is voluntary, it's not independent. You're doing it yourself. Okay. This is my blog post, and I'm just going to leave it for you guys because you can read it all and ask questions on there or wherever you want. Okay. The 1853 response says that no action may be taken by the spouses that would impede conception. The goal of NFP is to impede conception, of course, via timing. Yep. Okay. Now, 1853 response, let me see. So long as there's okay. Like I already said, you can avoid the fertile window all you want as long as you're not doing it to avoid fertility. That's all they're saying. That's it. Now, in 1880, they came back. They're like, whoa, we're not quite getting the NFP we wanted out of Rome. Let's ask them a curveball question here and see if we can get a better answer. Dig. So they said, NFP advocates tried again. Okay. Father LeConte, this guy, submitted the following questions to the Sacred Penitentiary. Whether married couples may have intercourse during such sterile periods, without committing mortal or venial sin. Because as you know, where is it? Share this tab instead. St. Thomas Aquinas. Oh, I forgot where I wrote it. Anyway, he says, he says, here, sorry, let me go back. St. Thomas Aquinas will tell you that you have to, if you're not trying to get pregnant, it's a sin. There's only two ways to use the Marriage Act, either to get pregnant or because you're honoring the debt from the other spouse who's trying to get pregnant. So he's saying, can we use such sterile periods without committing mortal venial sin? Whether the confessor may suggest such a procedure either to the wife who detests the sin of onanism or her husband but cannot correct him, to either spouse who shrinks from having numerous children. So if you don't want to have a bunch of kids, dear Rome, if your spouse, if your wife doesn't want to have a bunch of kids, can she use NFP? That's what they're asking, okay? The response from Rome is, in 1880, married couples who use their marriage right in the aforesaid manner are not to be disturbed. So they're basically having intercourse during such sterile periods. Okay? And the confessor may suggest the opinion in question cautiously to those married people who has tried in vain by other means to dissuade them from the detestable sin of onanism. So what he's talking about, or what they mean by this, is you I have to think this because it's getting late. I'm still kind of shrugging off a little bit of Oktoberfest last night. We DJ'd the party. It was fun. Okay. So let me see what I wrote here. There is no sin in having relations during known infertile periods, provided conception is not avoided deliberately. That's right. The response does not permit NFP for spouses who shrink from having numerous children, but only for the sin of onanism. So yes, they said here, hey, what about if they don't want a lot of children? It doesn't matter what your motivation is. It's a sin, is what he's saying, because you have to put procreation primary. That's it. And that is expounded on in Casti Connubii as well as the Vademecum. Whoops, sorry about that. Let me go back. Did I mess that up? Let's go back. Yeah, as far as the Vademecum of Confessors goes as well. Only permitted. Okay, so yeah, that's Casti 59. It's the same thing. That's where they get this from. Holy Church knows well that not infrequently one of the parties is sinned against rather than sinning. Okay, so that is exactly what this is talking about. One of the partners is sinned against because they want to use either onanism, but if that won't work, they want to use what I call female onanism, which is NFP. It's with female withdrawal. We're keeping the eggs away. He keeps the seed away in onanism, and she keeps the eggs away in NFP. So, Casti 59, in such a case, there is no sin, provided that mindful of the law of charity. In other words, if you want to use NFP to avoid, there is no sin, provided that mindful of the law of charity, you do not neglect to seek to deter your partner from sin. In other words, someone is sinning when they use NFP. And the innocent spouse can be telling them, don't do this, but it's not referring to artificial contraception because the Sacred Penitentiary said it's not in 1916. And I got a link to that, and you can see that. So back and then in 97, they basically said the same thing. What about when cases of cooperation, sin of the spouse who voluntarily renders the conjugal act infecund? Okay, that's another. So if you're basically trying not to have kids, what do? It's a sin, right? Yeah, they're not talking about artificial contraception because you can never cooperate with that. You can only cooperate when the action of the cooperating spouse, the innocent spouse, is not already illicit. And then it footnotes to 47, which is these two cases down here, which is everything up here that I talked about from the Sacred Penitentiary. So they're saying that it is a sin to render the conjugal act infecund, aka NFP. It is a sin to do that. But it's not already illicit because it starts off naturally. Just like onanism, just like NFP, it starts off naturally. Okay, but it finishes unnaturally. That's what's going on. And I explain that all in here, and you guys can read this and find more questions for me if you want. Hang on, I'll come back in a second.
First of all, congratulations, matrimony is a great vocation. This is God's invitation to lead one another to the pearly gates, but I'm afraid I can't give you permission to use something that's sinful. The church forbids contraception. They do it for good reason. The marital act is for procreation and unity.
There's the problem right there, Enoch. That's him. I didn't know if that was the real guy, but that's him. Yeah, and so he's not. That's what he looks like. Anyhow, he was saying the marital act is for procreation and union or unity or whatever. There's the lie right there. There's the NFP lie. It's not procreation. Excuse me. Marriage is only for procreation, not procreation and union or whatever they call it. That's another way of saying the flesh is required, which turns into flesh primary. So I'm going to come back to my man Enoch here in a minute, but let's watch Margaret Sanger because this is pretty cool, and she talks about this very thing. Let's listen to her comments, okay?
Same as the non-Catholics do. Exactly the same.
Well, let's look at the official Catholic position.
opposition to birth control. I read now from a church publication called The Question Box.
The question box is a really cool. It's like an old fashioned Catholic Answers kind of thing, and they had all the correct Orthodox answers. Though I looked it up.
In forbidding birth control, it says the following. It says the immediate purpose and primary end of marriage is the begetting of children. When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, that is by birth control, it is used unethically and unnaturally.
See, they sit here. We can rewind it just for kicks.
When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, birth control. I read now from a church publication called
The primary purpose.
In forbidding birth control, it says the following. It says the immediate purpose and primary end of marriage is the begetting of children.
Now, notice he didn't say the primary purpose, the immediate purpose is the begetting of children and unity, or procreation and unity. This whole unity thing is an add-on from 1965. It's the spirit of Vatican II that did it. That's all this is. This is why birth control is always wrong, but ain't nobody care anymore, because if unity is number one, or if unity is required, then NFP, then therefore contraception. Let's listen.
When the marital relation is so used as to render the fulfillment of its purposes impossible, that is by birth control, it is used unethically and unnaturally. Now, what's wrong with that position?
Well, it's very wrong. It's not normal. It's not, it has a wrong attitude toward marriage, toward love, toward the relationships between men and women.
Well, the natural law, they say, is that, first of all, the primary function of sex in marriage is to beget children.
See, she's saying it's a wrong attitude towards love, okay? So this is where love wins comes from. Contraception and NFP usher in the love wins philosophy, okay? It's a legal thing. In other words, the purpose is no longer primarily procreation, but it is primarily love. You cannot have two primary purposes. It does not exist. It's one or the other.
Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with it 100%.
Your feeling is what, then?
My feeling is that love and the attraction between men and women, in many cases, the very finest relationship, has nothing to do with bearing a child. It's secondary.
Boom. That's it. It has nothing to do with bearing a child. It's secondary. She was exactly right on how to justify contraception and NFP, is to call love primary, to call procreation secondary. And that's exactly what Humane Vitae does, okay? Now, where should we go from here? Let's watch the rest of my boy Enoch. Cool. And let me fast forward to another good part, quote unquote, of his sweet rap video. Let's go to this. I think it's 208 here. Let's check it out here. Here we go. Ready? Hit it.
Okay, so maybe the pill can be quite damaging, but we was examining something about natural family planning, and so we can control the number of kids we want without really abandoning the church's stance on this, and both of us can really do it naturally. And now let me stop you right there, because I know what you're searching for, but I'm afraid natural family planning is not natural birth control. Pius XII gave us great reason to avoid.
Boom! Pius XII gave us great reasons to avoid, serious reasons to avoid, grave reasons to avoid, whatever you want to call it. Pius XII, if NFP is natural and from the church, Pius XII cannot give us reasons, okay? He can't create nature or change nature, all right? So if grave reasons is, okay. This whole grave reasons thing is to justify, that's like grave reasons for abortion. So we got to go back, and this is, like I said, we're focusing on the history of NFP. So we have debunked or shown why the Sacred Penitentiary in the 1880s and 1850s did not endorse NFP, but basically said you don't have to crank out the maximum number of kids. If you happen to be avoiding the fertile window, that's fine, as long as you're not doing so to avoid pregnancy, aka impede conception, okay? And NFP is impeding conception. Now, like I said, Taylor Marshall and basically everybody likes to, or Father Ripperger will talk all about the Pius XII and the serious reasons and stuff like that. All right. No, like I said, if you go back to Casti Connubii, I've said this 1,000 times. No reason, however grave. I think it's Casti 54. Permits anything against nature. And when you are trying to not have babies, just like Margaret Sanger was saying, that's against nature. Or not even, but the interviewer, Chris Wallace, was pretty cool. He kept going on and he says, yes, because the church teaches that the primary purpose is procreation alone, then, or procreation education of kids, then you are violating nature when you don't do that. And that's all that NFP is. But if you start saying that the primary purpose is or marriage is for procreation and unity, you've created a new purpose, a Margaret Sanger purpose, which is love. But you cannot have two first place finishers. It's one or the other. So love wins. That's all this is. All right. What else do we got? Let me see here. I guess we can talk about this one here real quick. Sorry. Boom. So this is from the 1944, right here, the 1944 Roman Rota. They were commenting. It's a really good. They're explaining why marriage is not null, even though there's no love in the room and all. And this 44 decision was really good. But part of what they talked about here is that Humane Vitae, they talked about Casti Connubii, which everyone likes to talk about. Casti Connubii 59 approves NFP, doesn't it? Right, because it says where life cannot be brought forth from timing. No. Look at what it says. This subordination to the primary end, which exists. Maybe I'll try to make this bigger so we can see it just a little bit bigger. Let me see if I can go like this. There. This subordination to the primary end, which exists through its natural structure in the naturally completed conjugal act, is observed and verified even in the wedded union of sterile persons and others who, for causes extrinsic to the act, cannot generate offspring. In other words, if it's something out of their control, okay? So people using the marriage act, if they're sterile or for other causes extrinsic, like menopause, they cannot generate offspring through the natural use of marriage. So you are the subordination of the primary end exists through its natural structure. Dig it? However, it's okay as long as the infertility is out of your control. But NFP is a choice. It's totally in your control. That's the problem. The following words of Pius the 11th, taken from Casti Connubii, refer to such persons. Okay, so they're referring to 59 here, which is what everyone says. Okay, I've read this 1,000 times. Okay, so from natural causes, owing to circumstances of time or certain defects, render it impossible for new life to originate. Cool? Okay, that's not NFP. That's you happen to be sterile for some reason, or you, so there's a defect, or menopause, okay? Because those things those are God's, that's God's department, not yours. But NFP is not God's department, it's your department. So that's in your control, which is why it's effectively birth control. Let's go to a little Humane Vitae, shall we? So this is why there's probably several reasons, but why the church can never approve NFP, and in fact, Humane Vitae does no such thing. It's based on a significance. Let me see if I can find it. The significance. I got to try to find it. Where is it? Shoot. I can't find it. But anyway, I got to find it in here. I didn't even bother because I've seen it so many times. Let me push pause and find it for a second. Okay, I found it. It is here, union and procreation. This is the fake definition of marriage, okay? Marriage is natural. Marriage is about natural law. Now they're saying there's a doctrine of union and procreation. This is This is a novel doctrine. It's brand new. It's never existed before 1965. Did not exist, okay? Often expounded on by the magisterium, is based on the inseparable connection, okay, between the unitive significance and the procreative significance. And everyone says, oh, yeah, you got to have love with your procreation or it's wrong. And that's why your marriage can be null. And that's why it's okay to pursue love, because you don't have to pursue procreation because the unitive can't be separated from the procreative. And if I'm having a hard time or life's a drag and this is hard and that's hard, I'm not going to be feeling at all unitive, if you get my hint, get my drift. So therefore, it's fine. Listen, NFP is based on a significance. You can't do that, all right? NFP is natural, nature, in physical. It's real. It's not just a sign. It's real. So if you base things on a significance, then you have to keep it in the theory, or you can have this. The calendar method is a significance, but if you don't ever do it, you just have it as a sign. Okay? No. So NFP is based on a significance. It's not based on nature. Okay? So the unitive significance, whatever that is exactly, we don't know. And the procreative significance, we do know what that is. Those is one flesh. Okay, I guess that's what they're trying to talk about, because you become physically and literally one flesh with your spouse. You become spiritually one flesh with them when you're married. Okay, so there's a sign in that. Okay, that's the sign, but it's not. You can't base the conjugal act rules on signs, okay? Like we said in the Margaret Sanger video, procreation alone is primary, and the church has always taught that. It comes from the Bible. Increase and multiply, it doesn't say increase and unify, etc. Otherwise, yeah, it would say increase and unify, and then it would talk about what the heck unity is. So there's why NFP, and this is why Humane Vitae does not make NFP okay, because it's based on signs, not nature. All right, then let's go down to 16, I think it is. Is it 16? Oh, boy. Probably. Okay, so here they're saying you got all these signs and everything, blah, 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 and we know that, okay, so you go ahead, you're thinking about NFP, and you've got reasons to not want babies and all this kind of stuff. When the fertile and when the infertile period recurs, they use their married intimacy. They use the conjugal act, not for procreation, but they use it to express love, okay? Right there is, you're violating the purpose of marriage. If we go back to the 50s when things weren't quite so nuts and we still had a little Christianity going on in the law, the purpose was procreation. And this is why when Pius XII said, if you're having a super hard time, you can use, nature is for love, but if it's not a hard time, nature is for procreation. No, that's redefining nature. That's why NFP can never be approved, and ultimately will be, this is all going to be overturned more publicly because it's bananas. That's what it is. Fertile period returns, they can use their married intimacy to express mutual love and safeguard their fidelity towards one another. Yeah. Okay, so they're taking a significance and they're turning it into nature. A significance is one thing and nature is another. That you can't do. Let's see if there's anything else by our friend Christian Wagner.
And baptism of desire has been scattered in magisterial statements and among all.
I think that was it. Yeah, that was it. Okay, so anyway, we're about done. I hope Christian Wagner unblocks me, or at least wants to talk about this, since he's a super smarty pants Aquinas guy, because Aquinas you can't get NFP past Aquinas. You can try, but you can't, because there's only two purposes to the conjugal act. Let me back up. There's only two ways to avoid sin. You're either honoring the debt because your spouse wants to have a kid, or you want to have a kid. Those are the two ways to excuse the conjugal act. Because procreation alone is primary, that's it. So, but this is largely a political thing, and that's why people shy away from it. But I wanted to, again, get to the history of this. I'll put all the notes in the show links, the show notes and the links. Hey, I need some likes and subscriptions too, because I'm kind of a nobody, and anything like that helps. But you also give me a hard time in the comments. I listen to all of them, and I won't blow you off. I'll talk as long as you want, as you know. So till next time.
You gotta change the way you're approaching this. Getting married is the most important. It's your entire family's soul, and you can't afford to split. I've seen marriages like this start and end over and over again, and you can ride with the devil, but at the end of your life, you got nothing to show for it. So here's my lesson: living a simple life with your family is a blessing. You can't take material things when only your children can follow you into heaven. The diocese you're going through is not preparing you. I don't mean to blame you, it's their error, but from what I'm hearing, the two of you are not ready for marriage.